The Johnson family had just moved into their dream house in the countryside. It was a spacious, old Victorian home with a big front porch and a large backyard. The family of four, consisting of Mr. and Mrs. Johnson and their two children, Emily and Jacob, were ecstatic about their new home. They spent the first few days unpacking and settling in, but soon strange things began to happen. Mrs. Johnson would wake up in the middle of the night to find all the kitchen cabinets and drawers open. Mr. Johnson would hear footsteps in the hallway when no one else was home. Emily complained of feeling a presence in her room, and Jacob refused to sleep in his own room, claiming he saw a shadowy figure watching him from the corner of his room. At first, the family dismissed these incidents as their imagination, or just the house settling in. But as the days went by, the occurrences became more frequent. Emily and Jacob were also affected by the spirit. They would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming and crying, claiming that the spirit was trying to harm them. The family was at their wits' end and didn't know what to do. They tried to seek help from paranormal investigators, but no one seemed to take them seriously. One night, as Mrs. Johnson was trying to fall asleep, she felt a cold breath on her neck, and suddenly, she was pushed off the bed. She screamed for her husband, and he came rushing in, only to find her lying on the floor, with scratches all over her body. That was the last straw for the Johnsons. They decided to leave the house and never look back. As they were leaving, Mrs. Johnson noticed a small, old book on a shelf in the living room. She picked it up and opened it, only to find that it was a diary of the previous owners. As she read through the pages, she found out that the house was indeed haunted by a malevolent spirit. The previous owners had performed a séance in the house, hoping to communicate with the spirit and find out why it was haunting the house. But instead, they had unwittingly unleashed the spirit, and it had been tormenting them ever since. They had tried everything to get rid of the spirit, but nothing seemed to work. Mrs. Johnson knew that they needed to do the same before leaving the house. She gathered her family and told them about the diary. They all agreed to perform the séance and try to communicate with the spirit. They lit candles and sat in a circle, holding hands. As they called out to the spirit, they felt a cold breeze in the room, and the candles flickered. Suddenly, they heard a voice, a low and menacing voice. It told them that it was a dark entity that had been summoned by the previous owners. It had been trapped in the house for centuries, and the only way it could leave was by possessing one of the family members. The Johnsons were horrified, and they knew they had to leave the house immediately. They all got up from the circle and started to gather their belongings. But as they were leaving, they heard a blood-curdling scream coming from Jacob's room. They rushed in to find him levitating above his bed, his eyes rolled back, and his body contorting in unnatural ways. The spirit had possessed Jacob, and there was nothing the family could do to save him. Mrs. Johnson collapsed in despair, and Mr. Johnson held her, crying uncontrollably. Emily ran to her brother, trying to shake him out of the possession, but it was too late. The spirit then spoke through Jacob, telling the family that it would now leave the house through the possession of Jacob's body. It warned them that if they ever tried to come back to the house, it would make sure that they suffer the same fate as the previous owners. With one final scream, Jacob's body fell back on the bed, lifeless. The spirit was gone, and the family was left in shock and grief. They knew they could never go back to their dream house, and they would never be the same again. The Johnsons moved away, trying to leave the memories of that house behind. But they could never forget the tragic events that had unfolded in that house. They never spoke of it to anyone, living with the weight of the sad and haunting ending of their time in that house.